All right, so let's talk about time management. Time management itself sounds a little bit scary, but I promise it's not. And so the idea today is to kind of work together and make this a workshop almost to make sure that you guys are getting on track. And just if I can answer any questions, I'm happy to help also. So meet your presenter. That's me. My name's Carmen. I am a student in the couple and family therapy program, master's level. I'm also CAEO Support Specialist, and I've been here since about last summer. So it's been a while with CAEO for me. And there's my email, just in case you have any follow-up questions I can answer for you after the presentation. I am more than happy to help. So as far as the presentation outline goes, I have a couple of tips and tricks for time management for you all. And then also it's going to be a little bit more of an interactive tip and tricks. So if you have some paper and a pencil nearby where you can write down some ideas for yourself, that would be awesome. And then I'll answer any questions, and then we'll also just have some time to workshop together and brainstorm and troubleshoot all together as a group here. All right, so let's talk about time management. So when you're planning for the new semester, I think the first step that kind of gives you your outline would be to think about your daily and weekly schedules, right? So your daily routines, considering your commute times, any class schedules, work schedules, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, things that sometimes we don't even remember about when we're going 100 miles per hour throughout the semester, right? So personal hygiene and self-care, those are things that we need to make time for that sometimes we forget about, right? Weekly routines, thinking about your household chores and things that need to get done every week. If it's laundry, if it's making time for family and friends, doing homework and classwork outside of your actual class time, right? Any extracurricular activities that you have set throughout the week, or even, again, self-care. So self-care looks different for a lot of people, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as you guys all share with me some ideas. But self-care could be, you know, at the end of the day, we're doing something that we enjoyed so that we can recharge, or it could be a weekly thing, something that we look forward to keep us motivated and just, you know, keep us going throughout the week. So your weekly school schedule, right? Where do we start with that? We start with, how many courses are you taking? Are they online? Are they in person? Are they at a set time? Are they asynchronous on your own time, right? So with those time blocks in your schedule, you already kind of know, right? So if class is from 1 to 2:15, then you'll block off that time period because you're in class. Versus if your class is an online course where you kind of get to do your work on your own time, you can set some time aside for that, right? So let's say you want to work on that when you come home for the day, and it's I don't know, maybe like 5 to 6, if you put an hour aside for treating it almost like it were an actual lecture, right? So then also ask yourself, when will you do homework? So kind of scheduling your study times and scheduling your homework times is helpful also, just to keep that organization for you throughout the weeks. Sometimes you won't stick to the routine, and that's completely fine. But then it's about like, okay, where do I have some free time so that I can replace that that assignment, right? So that I can make sure that I stay on top of my deadlines. And then think about if there's any big deadlines that you need to plan for. So, excuse me. With this, kind of thinking about using your course syllabus to add your important deadlines and due dates to either your calendars or your planners. And we'll talk about how to link your Canvas. We'll talk about how to link your Canvas calendar to your digital calendars as well. I'll walk through it during the workshop portion of the presentation. So you're creating reminders for yourself a week or two before your actual due date to an assignment is also a good kind of rule of thumb. For example, if you use a planner and your due date is in 2 weeks, 2 weeks before, you can set a reminder for yourself and just put start XYZ assignment, right? That's due in 2 weeks. All right. So then again, plan your study times, right? So, and this is roughly, so roughly plan your study times. Whenever you plan to, if it's a study session, if it's going to a study group, right? Or if it's just to do homework, the idea is that you want to train your brain with the schedule. And then also along this, plan for breaks during your study times too, because I know it can be very easy to, want to sit down and have all your books in front of you and just go for it. But it's important that you take breaks here and there so that you really are recharging in between and it doesn't feel like you're just reading words on a page or just going through the motions of doing the homework. Then another little important side note, you want to make sure that you're scheduling your meals, your bedtimes, and all your essentials. So again, life gets busy and days are hectic. We're all going 100 miles per hour. I know we all have that nonstop student schedule, but be sure you're taking care of yourself, right? Because we don't want to make it to that point of burnout where we feel like, we just lost motivation and don't want to, not necessarily don't want to do things, but don't feel like we have the energy to do things, right? So making sure that you're taking care of yourself along the way can really help to prevent that. And then if you do land in burnout, reach out to your resources. Again, your support specialists are here to support you. Your study groups, TAs, and everyone you can kind of reach out to. We're all here to support you and, really be those resources for you. Then for all my students out there that also work, think about what your weekly work schedule is like, right? So how many hours are you working per week? Is it a full-time job? Is it a part-time job? Do you have a set schedule? So with this, and I'm happy to answer questions at the end if you have any specific questions. But I kind of think back to, and this is something that some of my students know already, some that are here. I work and go to school, and I've always had during undergrad and throughout my master's, right? I've always had part-time jobs, but there was at one point where I was working multiple part-time jobs and still being a full-time student. So then we have to talk about, okay, how are we balancing that and navigating that space, right? We still want to make sure that we're giving ourselves days off, days to rest, days to do homework, and all of that good stuff, right? So then on your daily, when you go to work, do you still have time and energy to do homework? And this is like thinking realistically, right? Because are you doing chores on the days that you're working, right? Do you have some time in the morning, then go to work and, then come home and do your chores, or then come home and do homework before or after work, right? Or if it's a really long shift, are we just sleeping in? Are we just resting, right? And there's not really like a good or bad way to go about it. It's just you kind of know your own kind of like how you work best, right? And you know yourself the best. So that's kind of the important takeaway from that, right? So yeah, again, it's important to find that balance between school and work and set realistic goals. So it's really important, and I know sometimes it's hard, but it's also important to set those boundaries for yourself, right? So let's say you have a day off from school and you're like, and definitely speaking from my own experience as well, there were days that I was like, oh yeah, I can pick up a shift. But then you come back home and it's like, oh, I shouldn't have picked up that shift. I should have stayed home, done homework, been doing chores and things like that, right? So now thinking about what's going to work best, right? So now we have made it to your guys' turn and kind of the workshop aspect of it. This portion first for questions, and then the workshop. Once we actually make it to that next slide, I will stop sharing my screen and I'll show you guys how to link your Canvas to your digital calendars. But your guys' turn. When does time management become tricky for you all? Is there anything that you want to know about time management in particular? Or are there any specific questions regarding your own schedules? You guys can type it in the chat. Feel free to unmute yourselves. We'll kind of start there.
I'll go. I think for me, the most difficult part is when we have competing obligations. So for me, like you mentioned, like I have to work and I can't not work because living is very expensive, especially now. And then, of course, there's deadlines, and I can't miss those. So I think one thing that has helped me kind of stay ahead of the game is like what you mentioned. We're not only are we setting daily goals, we're also setting weekly goals, especially because I do all online classes. So I think not being there physically, sometimes I forget about, what's there. So just to make sure that I'm aware of deadlines, that's really helped. But do you have any other tips for, I think, like just kind of finding that balance between competing like obligations and things that we have to absolutely meet?
Right. And that's a good question. And it's a good point because sometimes things do like stack up, right? So let's say you have a deadline, but you also have a work shift that day, right? So you're kind of thinking ahead of time and kind of planning for that. Um, I think another way to kind of tackle those tasks and so that it feels a little bit less overwhelming could be to um, make a to-do list, but prioritize your task on the to-do list, right? Kind of set yourself up for success in the way of like, okay, this assignment is going to take me about 30 minutes. This assignment is going to take me about an hour. Which one is most pressing? Which one's due first, right? And then you would prioritize that first task, get that one done and completed and out of the way. So then you can follow up with the next task. And then again, just kind of planning ahead of time for any work shifts or things that do come up, right? And then let me go ahead and start reading some of these comments in the chat. Yonji, was that helpful? Do you think that's something that you can try and see if it works out?
Yeah, I think that's a really awesome way to think about it. Like you said, with managing priorities,
Mm-hmm.
with because there's going to be one thing that's like more dire. So just keeping that in mind and just like taking it step by step on a list to check it off kind of helps you like stay motivated to get the
Right,
next thing as well. So that
right.
helps.
Awesome. Awesome. And then in the chat, ooh, I don't want to butcher your name, but I'm gonna try to pronounce it. Diluid. Yeah, I'm so sorry. But they mentioned it becomes tricky, especially during midterms or finals week. Right. So the pressure is high during those times. And then we're also putting in their study times for exams. And then which exam comes first. And we're kind of prioritizing that way too, right? William is in the library, so I can't talk. But my question is, what different programs and tactics have you guys used to write deadlines? I use Google Calendar for the entirety of my undergrad career, but I have a hard time reminding myself to check it every now and then. Managing deadlines for online courses, right? Class times and assignments on calendars, but I've never set a break time in my calendar. Any recommendations for reading textbook chapters? I'll set a time to read, but sometimes I'm falling asleep or I get distracted and it ends up taking me longer than planned. In regards to tracking deadlines, I would recommend tools like Notion or My Study Life. You can keep track of your assignments and their due dates there, and it makes it really organized. So that's awesome. I did not know about those tools, but those are definitely good options to check out. Let's see. And so then part of that too is like using all of your resources in adjunction to each other, right? So if you have your digital calendar set up a certain way, and then you have a physical planner, I tend to use my physical planner almost as a to-do list. So that way you can actually physically mark off that you are completing your assignments and your tasks as you go by the motions. But yes, definitely set your break times. There's also study timers online. So if you guys are familiar with the Pomodoro technique, they have a Pomodoro timer online. And so essentially the Pomodoro technique, what it is that you're studying or working or being productive for 25 minutes, and then you take a 5-minute break. So you're working in intervals of 30 minutes, right? And so that's supposed to boost your productivity and just kind of go your extra mile to try to be a little bit more efficient. So yeah, definitely explore using multiple options of your planners together. And then as far as reading textbooks goes, because I definitely have been in that space where, you're reading your textbook, it's later in the night, and then fall asleep on the textbook, or even just you're reading through the textbook and the chapter is really, really long. So then it feels like you're no longer engaging with the material. You really have to find ways to engage with it. So using sticky notes is always my go-to. Put a sticky note in the section that you're reading and then write a quick summary for yourself to really engage with the material. Or if a question comes up while you're reading something, use that sticky note, write the question down, so then you can bring it to class, you can bring it to your classmates and kind of engage with the material on the textbook like that. So yeah, Pomodoro helped me figure out how long I've been working on something, and if I need to switch up my tactics, if it takes too long, yeah, you're welcome. Also vote for the textbook tips. And then if you guys try all these out and they're still not working, or maybe there's something that you find along the way that you make it a little bit more personable for yourself, that's always helpful too, right? Because again, you guys know what works best for you. And then that'll just make it that much more interesting and engaging for yourselves as well. So, workshop, make sure that you have all your syllabus together for the new semester, so that you can highlight any due dates, highlight your class schedules, your deadlines, and office hours and availabilities from your professors. Sometimes the professors put that schedule at the end of it, right? So where you have all of your deadlines listed, or everything that you have for each week coming up in the semester. That's always helpful to use to add to your planners as well. And now I'm gonna stop sharing my screen really quick so that I can show you guys how to link your Canvas calendar to your Google Calendar. And if you guys already know how to do this, then you are ahead of the game, definitely. I think I learned this a little bit later in my undergrad career. So essentially what you wanna do is when you get to Canvas, you'll more than likely pop up to your dashboard page, but then you'll click your calendar. And this is what you'll see, right? And then down here, if you scroll to, let me minimize this screen. You scroll to this little section right here that says calendar feed, it'll pop up with this link and you can click to view calendar feed. That will download an attachment for your computer calendar itself. But I personally like to copy and paste it and take it over to Google Calendar, where you'll go into your settings and then scroll down over here on your left-hand menu. Scroll on your left-hand menu, click right here where it says add calendar from URL. So copy and paste that link onto that calendar. And so now it says calendar created, it'll get your events. You'll go back to your calendar, make sure that it's visible here. And I have an assignment due on the 14th, and there it is. So it'll give you your assignments as deadlines and calendar events on the very top of your day. So then that way you also have it on your digital calendar without having to go in there and input it yourself. So now, if we go back to our presentation. Yep, so it also saves your assignment descriptions, which is really helpful. You won't have to click back and forth between your Canvas and your calendar and everything like that, but it's always good to double check both, right? So then this last part to this slide is just ask more questions if anyone has any more questions. And then on top of that, I'll go over these and then I'll leave up the last slide for questions. So make sure you're using your resources. Again, like I said, connect with your support specialists, make sure you're reaching out to them. if anything comes up, if you want to talk about burnout or anything in that sense, ask them. We're all students also, so we're in there with you as far as the student life goes. Also use the Academic Success Center. They have coaching available, which is an awesome option to really promote the use of and the building of your soft skills. So they're great over there. And then you have your campus resources. So the Student Wellness and Recreation Center, make sure you're using that and taking advantage of it because it's part of your tuition. And it's always good to, go and get some movement in your body and just decompress from always being on the computer, always being in the books, and just really exercise does mean amazing things for you, right? So then you have CAPS, the CICFC, and the practice for mental health needs, also available through your tuition. And as students, at least I know for CAPS and the CICFC, that's the case. Other than that, thank y'all and good luck in your new semester.